Recognize myself for 5 minutes of questioning. Well, I think that we agree on the end goal. So thank you. I like very much what you have been saying. So I just have a few questions here for you, and I'm going to start with Mr. Jacobstein. As you know, last month, Cuban regime officials were at the Miami airport inspecting something, a tour with TCA. And we just learned that last week, there was a second secret visit of 4 Cuban regime officials to the same airport, the Miami International Airport, but this time 4 agreements were signed with the United States government. What type of agreements are those? Do you have any idea, Mr. Jacobstein?
Thank you very much for your question. So in terms of TSA, I would say TSA has coordinated with the Cuban Civil Aviation Authority and the Cuban Authority for Airport and Services for years on airport security measures and best practices, always in the U.S. interest.
But signing agreements with the Cubans, do you think the Cubans ever, once they sign, they ever fulfill their promise?
So I'd just say in terms of the visit of the FAA, I don't want to speak on behalf of the Department of Transportation or the FAA.
Yeah, but you're at the State Department. You know everything that the United States government is doing vis-a-vis Cuba.
I would say the rationale for this visit is clear and very much in the U.S. national interest. We're interested in aviation
it's clear.
safety.
You're going to tell me that the Cubans are going to help the Americans fight terrorism if they are in the list of terrorist states? So maybe, and maybe you can clarify this, I'm not sure why maybe you guys are trying to create a scenario where you can take Cuba off the list of terrorist countries. Do you think that's what you guys are doing? By granting, by saying, you see the Cubans are here in Miami and they're signing agreements and they're going to help us fight terrorism. Tell me.
Absolutely not.
Oh, good. So you're not going to take Cuba off the list of terrorist countries? Is that what you're telling me?
You asked me about these visits. These visits are intended to promote aviation safety and security, especially for U.S. passengers. That is fundamental and critical to us. We want all these passengers, including Cuban Americans who go back and visit their family members, to be safe.
I agree with that, but at the same time, you're talking to Cuba officials. So go back to, is not what Cuba wants, which we know what they want, is what the United States, in this case, the Biden administration is looking for, which I really would like to be wrong in thinking that you're just laying the groundwork so you can take Cuba off that list. And I just want you to tell me that I'm wrong. Am I wrong? You're not planning to take it off.
So as I've said before, U.S. law establishes specific statutory criteria for rescinding a state-sponsored terror designation.
I am not asking you that. I'm asking you something different. Do you think the State Department at this hour is creating the conditions and the scenario in order to take Cuba off the list of terrorist
At this time, there is no review ongoing on state-sponsored terror. At this time, there is no ongoing review on the state-sponsored terror designation.
But you have until July 12th to start that, ongoing, or to start that investigation or that study, because you have a specific date. So you're telling me right now, of course, is what? Is July, is June, what, 28th? But you have until July 12th. So what are you guys planning to do July 13th?
There's no specific time frame for a review, but at this...
Oh, yes, 6 months before. You need to review, according to the law, you need to review 6 months before, and then you take them off or you leave them on. So July 12th would be the day.
I don't think that's accurate to say that July 12th is the day, but I just would say again that should any review happen, any future review would be based on the law and criteria established by Congress.
Can you just ask yes or no if you guys are thinking about taking Cuba off the list? And the only reason why I'm insisting on this is because if you were to do that, you're giving that cruel and despicable regime oxygen to do what you just said right now. 1,000 political prisoners are in jail just because they went out and they claim libertad. So can you tell me yes or no? Are you guys thinking about taking Cuba off the list or not?
I would just say again, any review of Cuba's status on the SST, should one happen, would be based on the law and the criteria established by Congress.
That means yes, you are thinking about doing it.
It does not.
And that is very bad. But we will talk about it further. Now, but I want to congratulate you at the same time because there's a new application on your phone called which I'm not going to say it, but it's very good, and there's good news for the Cubans because now, for what I hear coming from the Biden administration, you're going to have an app that the Cubans are going to be able to use, and then when ETETSA shuts down, then this app is going to allow the Cubans to connect to another form of internet. And that's great. So, en español, para los cubanos no están solos. Aquí en el Congreso estamos haciendo todo lo posible para que haya una aplicación en el teléfono y que se puedan conectar en el internet cuando ETETSA tumba la señal. Do you know anything about that?
I'm not tracking this specific issue, but happy to discuss our efforts.
But you just said it right now that you wanted digital. You said digital connectivity. That's number one, and Mr. Howell said it too. If you give connectivity to the Cubans, you're giving them the possibility of them demonstrating in the streets of Havana, and everyone will see them, even though they're being beaten by the regime. That's great. Connectivity, that's all we need. Do you agree?
Yes, the administration supports the Cuban people access to an open, interoperable, secure, and reliable internet. U.S. regulations already allow for certain activities to support the Cuban people's access to information on the internet. And the actions announced by OFAC, by the Treasury Department, on May 28th, including supporting greater access to U.S. internet services, applications, e-commerce platform that builds on that support. And then on top of that, I would say our programs through the Bureau of Democracy, Human Rights, and Labor, they increase Cubans' on-island ability to access information and to communicate freely and securely using digital security best practices and censorship circumvention tools. So this is very much at the top of our mind.
Good. And we're going to work with it because I'm just saying it to you and to the Cuban people who are watching this hearing that there's hope coming. And I don't want to extend my time too much, and I don't want to fatigue my colleagues' patience. Just one more, Honduras. The State Department was supposed to give Congress a report on democracy in Honduras. It was due last week. What happened?
I will follow up on the status of the report as soon as I'm back.
All right, but why haven't you finished it?
Sometimes these reports lag in time for a number of reasons, but I don't have anything further than that,
Well,
but happy to provide
you're not
that.
giving me, but I'm giving, unfortunately, Madam President Xiomara Castro, I'm giving her an F on the report because democracy is not being protected in Honduras, and I'm going to give you two examples. Madam President just honored Nicolás Maduro, the highest honor of Hondurans can give. How embarrassing for the Hondurans, the Francisco Morazán medal to Nicolás Maduro, really. And Madam President is China's best friend in the region. And not only that, she has established colectivos, Chavez style. You know what those are? That she forms sort of a paramilitary, a group of people with guns so they can go and attack the police. So in my book, she gets an F. What do you say about that?
Thank you very much. So our goal—
I'm sure she thanks you too.
Our goal through the root causes strategy in Central America is to focus on promoting democracy, prosperity,
But talk
security.
to me about Honduras specifically. How do you view what she's doing?
Specifically in Honduras, there are a number of areas in which we cooperate on migration management, on investment facilitation. We recently signed a memorandum of understanding on gender-based violence. Yes, there are challenges as well. And for example, just last fall, there were violent attacks on members of Congress during the selection process for the Attorney General. And so we, in response, used the Section 353 report to put a sanction in place for Ricardo Arturo Salgado Bonilla, who's the current minister
Are
of
you sending, Madam
planning.
President, the message that she should not be messing with Honduras democracy, and she should not be moving to the left like Chavez, Maduro, Ortega, Fidel? Are you sending that message?
Throughout the region, we absolutely focus on the need to have
And
good
what do they respond in exchange?
Good governance is critical in all the countries of Central America.
But
and
what
that
do
is
they respond? What do they tell you when you send that very noble message?
We have countless conversations. I won't get into the internal diplomatic conversations, but this is something that's top of mind, along with our focus on shared economic prosperity, anti-corruption, migration management,
Of course.
and a host of issues.
Finally, another 30 seconds, Nicaragua. As you said, Rosario and Daniel, they have a big piñata. They are now, Nicaragua has become this platform for people to arrive to come to the United States. We're talking about 1,000 flights. Each person pays $10,000. You've had 300,000 people from all over right here. You have people coming from Morocco, from Senegal, from Libya, from India, from Kyrgyzstan, from Kazakhstan. You have 300,000 people coming to Nicaragua, and happens that 8 of them were terrorist members of ISIS. They wound up in New York. So what list would you put Ortega on?
Absolutely. This is top of mind for us. No one should profit off of vulnerable
What
migrants.
are you going to do about it?
We've taken a number of steps, which I outlined in my...
Tell me 2 of them.
For example, we implemented a new 3C policy Secretary Blinken announced in November 2023, in which we're revoking visas for charter airlines who are facilitating irregular migration through Nicaragua. We put in place a number of sanctions just on May 15th,
Why don't
which
you
I mentioned.
put them on the list of terrorist countries as well? Can you do that? Put Nicaragua? I mean, they're sponsoring terrorists. They're letting terrorists go through to come here.
Happy
we
to
do
take
that?
back your recommendation. I would say that
Now,
we've
don't
taken a
you
number of...
Would you agree with that?
We've taken a number of very robust steps to deal with the irregular migration challenge, and you've seen a reduction in the charter flights. It's still a huge challenge, and I'm working very closely, in particular with commercial airlines, the International Air Transport Association, on the margins of the Los Angeles Declaration ministerial meeting that Secretary Blinken attended in Guatemala, put out a robust statement on the work they're doing. So we're working both inside of Nicaragua and outside of Nicaragua to address this critical challenge.
Thank you for your efforts. I yield back. And now I recognize myself for 5 minutes of questioning. Just wanted to continue with what I was asking you and go back now in depth that we have a little bit more time about Nicaragua. It's embarrassing what they're doing. It's embarrassing. And we have allowed it. We're talking about 300,000 people from all over the world coming to Nicaragua, 1,000 flights in the last year, $10,000 per person, and we have terrorist cells in New York and Philadelphia. So in reality, what can we do to send the message to Daniel Ortega, who has transformed that country into a tyranny in the last 4 years, that he needs to stop this? He's making a big dough, big piñata out of this. So level with me. What can we really do?
Thank you. So we're taking aggressive action in this space.
And what does aggressive action mean?
President Biden issued an executive order in October 2022, which we implemented this year in May to the Treasury Department to sanction 2 entities in the gold sector. This is a sector that is enriching Ortega Murillo's regime. So that is one piece of it. You've seen the sanctions, countless visa revocations, additional sanctions on his Attorney General, on the Russia Training Center.
But you know, Mr. Jacobstein, that those people do not want to come to Saks or go to Disney World. So they don't really care about coming to the United States. It's CAFTA DR that will hurt them. And I hate to say this because it's not very good for the average Nicaraguan. But we got somehow stop these people. You know Rosario Murillo is evil. You know this. And look what they're doing to us. And Mexico is letting them come through, but it comes through Nicaragua. So tell me, what else can we do? Because we don't want, can you imagine? I don't even want to say it in public. Please tell me.
Thank you. So we share your concerns. We're extremely concerned, and that's why we have taken aggressive actions both on, you mentioned the visa policy, that's one piece, but also sanctions that get them in their pocketbook, and that's what happened with the gold sector sanctions. Sanctioning the Russia Training Center was also really important because that went after their efforts to, essentially train others in the hemisphere on Russian police tactics. So we took these actions, but then also, as I said, we're working to put in penalties against the regime itself. We're also working outside of Nicaragua. That's through the visa revocations for executives of charter airline companies, through our good collaboration with commercial airlines to work closely with them. So we're working across the board to address this issue. And our diplomatic efforts, honestly, with foreign governments and outreach have helped prevent numerous charter flights bound for Nicaragua from Africa, Central Asia, the Middle East. Our embassy in Managua, our embassies around the world are sharing information with each other to ensure that these charter flights stop.
So maybe we can send the message to, I'm just going to translate what you said. We can send the message to the private sector, meaning those charter companies, that they should not be engaging in business anymore with the Ortega regime.
Absolutely.
But that's exactly what you're doing.
Our diplomats do that.
How can we help you send that message loud and clear?
We would appreciate that. Well, we're happy to work with you in your office in finding
Of
ways
course.
to collaborate. We do feel that a number of charter airlines have moved out of this space, but in a sense, it's whack-a-mole.
We need
And
all of
so we
them
need
out
to
of the
continue
space.
continue to push. So we'd be happy to work with you on that.
Good. Now, let's go back to Honduras. You know that Honduras, I just told you that I give her an F, unfortunately, because I have a lot of thousands of Hondurans in my district. Those are hardworking people. They don't deserve this type of political elite. Now, recently, the president has allowed 100 Cuban doctors to get to Honduras. We know that the Cuban doctors are treated as slaves. USMCA says that you cannot treat any type of professional as this type of, or be involved in this type of human trafficking. El Colegio Médico de Honduras opposed their presence. This Congress passed a law that requires the State Department to cancel the United States visas of any government official who is involved in trafficking Cubans or any other nationality. So, are you concerned about the fact that the Cubans are now being slaved by Xiomara Castro's government?
We're very concerned about Cuba's medical missions. You mentioned the FY24 Appropriations Act, which called for a report listing the countries and international organizations for which the Secretary's credible information are directly paying the government of Cuba for coerced and trafficked labor of Cuban medical professionals. So after the president—
Interrupting you, I mean, you
Yeah.
understand that that money doesn't get to the Cuban doctor's pocket, right?
Yes.
So that government goes, that money goes to the Cuban government. So you pay $1,000 for one Cuban, $5,000, and the Cuban doctor gets $200.
Absolutely. And we continue to urge countries considering hiring Cuban workers to keep agreements transparent and respect human rights and internationally recognized labor rights.
But why don't we cancel their visas?
So
That will be a very loud message. Would you consider that?
Thank
Any
you.
Honduran government official that is involved in the human trafficking of Cuban doctors or any other doctor doesn't come to the United States.
yeah,
Do you like that idea?
absolutely. We'd be happy to look into any information you have on individuals. The department at this time does not have—
Starting with the president, just like you guys did with Jamate in Guatemala. Cancel their visa. Don't you see that everyone wants to enjoy the American dream and come and enjoy what we have? So we got to use that in order to help other people. The Cubans, the Nicaraguans, the Hondurans, the Guatemalans, the Salvadorians, everybody is entailed.
Happy to receive any
Do you
information
agree
have.
with that?
We'd be happy
I
to
need you to do that because that way we're sending a very strong message to these governments that they cannot be playing around and doing what they're not supposed to do when it comes to human rights.
Yeah, happy to receive information on this when on any of these issues and to follow up with you.
All right, now, finally, let's go back to Cuba and connectivity. You know that I've always said that the Biden administration, after July 11th, the best thing that it can do for the Cubans is to give them connectivity. You know very well, and the Biden administration has been there with the Cubans, and you have recognized that they have come out into the streets just simply screaming libertad, right? And connectivity is, if they could have connectivity, which is having internet, once ETETSA, which is the Cuban internet company, shuts down, the average Cuban would go back into the streets, demonstrate, and at least know that if they're being beaten, at least the world will see them. That's what I would need, and I represent the Cuban exile community in Miami. Connectivity. What do you know about this new app?
As I mentioned previously, I don't have information on this app, but would be happy to follow up. I would just say more generally—
What do you mean you don't have information on this app? This app is, it's out there, and we're about to announce it.
look forward to learning more. I would say it's important to note that despite the Cuban government's efforts to control access to information, millions of Cubans are online every day, accessing a whole variety of information, including our very active U.S. Embassy.
But when they go out and Cienfuegos or here or there, you know what the Cuban regime does? They shut it down. How do I know? Because I have people in Cuba telling me, oh, they just shut down internet, and it's just text. Obviously, video is no good because they're going to see how the repressive apparatus is beating them and breaking their necks on the streets.
And this is precisely why our programs increase Cubans' on-island ability to access information, to communicate freely and securely using digital security best practices and censorship circumvention tools. So this is top of mind for us.
All right, good. I'm glad that it's a priority for me too. And finally, I just want to go, Mr. Howell, you have not been able, and I'm very sorry that I've not spoken with you or have given the opportunity to speak a little bit more. But, you know, when I was a news reporter for Univision, I was the Central American bureau chief, and I lived in El Salvador and Honduras. And I can say to you that USAID is like God the Father. Everyone loves USAID because it brings the best of the American system, not only the American dollars. So I have high regard for USAID. I have been hearing lately that within Central America, the USAID policies have changed. What do I mean by that? That sometimes you give money to those programs that do not necessarily are aligned with what the local people want. That we're talking too much about cultural and social and sexual orientations, and basically what the Guatemalans and the Hondurans, what they want is a job, be able to learn a trade, be able to have a little loan so they can live their little American dream in their country. So what do you say to that, to those criticisms that I am sure you have heard them?
Thank you, Chairwoman Salazar. Actually, in Honduras, we are working closely with the people of Honduras, and we've worked there for over 60 years and proud to work with civil society groups like the National Anti-Corruption Council, which has actually exposed cases of corruption very recently with a former Vice Minister of Security under the previous administration. We also work to prevent and stop gender-based violence, which is a terrible scourge.
Why don't you give me 2 or 3 programs that are the top programs, let's say, in Guatemala, in Honduras, those 2 countries, top programs that are where you are allocating the most resources in?
Well, as far as one of our success stories, certainly working with the private sector, USAID has worked with 70,000 coffee farming families. That's over half of all coffee farming families. And with international buyers, are exporting high-quality Honduran coffee internationally, creating jobs and improving the incomes of farming families.
What else?
What else? We're actually working closely with the Labor Ministry of Honduras on legal pathways for H-2 visas. We've tripled the number of H-2 visas emitted from Honduras to allow Hondurans to work ethically and temporarily here in the U.S. under its Lawful Pathways program that benefits not only the Honduran people, but also U.S. consumers and U.S. companies.
Sure. What about Guatemala?
Well, glad you asked. I worked there for 4 years and worked very successfully as well with the private sector in Guatemala, training youth, preventing violence, working with civil society and as well the municipalities across Guatemala. Climate change is another key aspect of our work, trying to maintain and save the Mayan Biosphere Reserve in the northern part of the country.
But have you heard the same thing that I've been hearing? And I'm not being so critical because I said I know USAID is not perfect, but it brings the American spirit to these countries, that sometimes you are putting too much emphasis on those programs that have nothing to do with the sensitivities of the place.
No, appreciate that. We appreciate feedback all the time. But currently,
you haven't heard it?
Under the President Arevalo, he just assumed office, so we're pleased to.
No, but before Arevalo, we were there doing Jamate and do everybody else. I mean, like you said, 70 years before. So you have not heard the criticism that I've heard, but I'll share that with you if you want to in private. So maybe you can hone in on those programs according to what the local people want.
No, appreciate that, ma'am.
Good. I will work with you and try to help you because I know the area very well. So thank you very much for your patience, and to you, Mr. Jacobstein. So I think that The clock saved you.